Hello friends, students and my fellow teachers and teacher educators. Today we are going to deliberate upon a very sensitive topic or theme of gender and gender stereotypes. It's important that we begin with what exactly do we mean when we talk of gender and gender stereotypes. We begin with a quote by Swami Vivekanand. It says it is impossible to think about the welfare of the world unless the condition of women is improved. With this quote, we definitely get a hint that all is not very fine with reference to the condition of women, and that we all need to work together to create a society which is equal for both men and women. A nation state which works for the welfare of people irrespective of their gender. And if we look at the definitions, it's important to know that what exactly is the difference between sex and gender, because both these terms are many times used interchangeably, which is not the case. Sex refers to a person's biological status and is typically categorized as male, female or intersex. There are a number of indicators of biological sex, including sex chromosomes, gonads, internal reproductive organs, which define us as male, female or intersex. So that means when I am talking of sex, I am talking of the biological orientation, that biology with which I have been born by the virtue of my birth as a male or as a female. Now, if we look at the definition of gender, on the other hand, gender refers to the attitudes, feelings, behaviors that a given culture, we know there is Indian culture, we know there is Western culture, we know there is European culture, there are different cultures all over the globe, right? That a given culture associate with a person's biological sex. Behavior that is compatible with cultural expectations is referred to as gender normative. That means behaviors that are viewed as incompatible with these expectations constitute gender non-conformity. That means when you are talking of gender, gender means your social role, that role which has been defined by the society for you, right? Your society, the way you are socialized to believe how you are going to behave as a man or as a woman is extremely important, and these gender roles are very specific or fixed across cultures. That means with the very fact the way baby girls are socialized right from the beginning behaving in a certain way, and the baby boys are socialized in behaving in a certain way. For example, if you look at the kind of toys which we expose the baby boys as well as the baby girls to play with, we definitely go in for cars and guns and all these aggressive toys with reference to boys, and with reference to girls you will generally find them being given kitchen sets to begin with. Now the gender socialization, that means begins very early in their lives, right? That you are making the girls move towards domesticity, and that you are making the boys being prepared for the world of work where they need to be assertive, where they need to be aggressive, is very much defined by the way we are socialized with our culture. This culture can be the culture of your home, the culture of your school, the culture of your neighborhood. All this sum total shapes your attitudes, your feelings about self and your feelings about the other gender as well, right? And your behaviors towards each other. Now, if you look at why should we discuss gender and gender stereotypes? We are discussing gender stereotypes and gender basically because this is a world which is unequal when we look at the gender relations. And let me define gender equality for you, which means that women and men have equal conditions for realizing their full human rights and for contributing to and benefiting from economic, social, cultural and political development. That means as men and women, both of us have equal conditions to fulfill our rights, to fulfill our obligations, whether social, whether economic, whether cultural, whether political. That means when you are talking of gender equality, I am talking that men and women both are equal whether it's an economic activity, whether it's a social activity, whether it's a cultural activity, whether it's a political activity. Let us take an example here. For example, when you're talking of gender equality, for men and women both working for equal number of hours, both of them have to be given equal amount of salaries, right? You cannot have a discrimination that she is a woman, so she would be paid less for the number of hours she is devoting, if the number of hours have been equal to what a man has been working in the same number of hours, right? So, gender equality is therefore equal valuing by society of the similarities and the differences of men and women. We need to respect these differences. We need to view that both men and women are complementary and supplementary in a society. They are both very important and both of them have their roles depending upon their choices. The society should not be defining the choices of girls or the choices of boys. It is based on men and women being full partners in their home, in their community, in their society, which of course when you talk of the society, it very much includes the workplace as well. Now look at what does the term, there's usually it is found that you get a confused between the terms gender equality and gender equity. What do you understand by gender equity? Gender equity is the process which basically helps you to achieve gender equality, or it is the process of being fair to men and women. To ensure fairness, measures must often be put in place to compensate for the historical and social disadvantages that prevent women and men from operating on a level playing field. Equity is the means, I would say, and equality is the result. So, if you need equality as the result, you have to have a system in place which is fair to both men and women, which gives equal opportunities to both men and women. And this begins by looking at both boys and girls with the same eyes. In our country, already the gender ratio is so skewed. That means the ratio of number of men to number of women, the number of women is much less to the number of men. So, it's extremely important for us to see that this gender ratio is balanced, because if the gender ratio is not balanced, it is an unequal society. It is an unequal society, and you also have research and statistics which tell us that when it is a highly unequal world and the number of women is very less, you always find more exploitation of women, and you also find more crime against women rising day by day, right? Now, what do you understand? How do we achieve when you talk of gender equity or when you talk of the result, that is gender equality? Empowerment is about people, you and me, men and women, taking control over our lives. What do you mean by taking control over our lives? Setting their own agendas. That means I have a choice to do what I want to do in my life. Gaining skills. I need to gain skills. You already know that we have a lot of emphasis on skill development these days with reference to the vocational avenues and elsewhere, right? So, building self-confidence, solving problems and developing self-reliance. Self-reliance is not a new concept. Self-reliance has been emphasized right from the times of Mahatma Gandhi when he talked of the basic education scheme in the 1930s, wherein the entire craft-centered education, the basis of the craft-centered education was to make students self-reliant along with learning joyfully. Ladies and gentlemen, no one can empower another, right? As you know, we need to empower ourselves. Only the individual can empower herself or himself to make choices or to speak out. It is your choice whether you decide to speak out or you decide to be mum. Be mum means being silent. But when you are silent too, you have made a choice. So nobody is going to come out and tell you, come, you are going to be empowered and we are going to empower you. No, empowerment is a process, and that process requires you to be self-confident, to be very, very clear with reference to your decisions, and to work in a spirit such that not only do you empower yourself, but you also become a role model for those who are around you. However, institutions including international cooperation agencies can support processes that can nurture self-empowerment of individuals or groups. Now, what do you understand by self-empowerment of individuals or groups? That means there are systems in place, there are agencies in place who can enable you to be self-empowered, who can enable you to become self-reliant, because that's a very, very important concept when you talk of empowerment. So, when you're talking of this concept of self-reliance and self-empowerment, that means government can train you, non-government organizations can train you, educate you with reference to how you can take care of this through entrepreneurship, how you can be getting some free ships or some scholarships by the government such that you increase your own skill sets, or how can you really engage yourself by participating in a self-help group such that you become self-empowered or self-reliant. Both, I would say, go together. If you are self-reliant, that's the part to empowerment, friends. Okay. Now, when you're talking of this entire realm of your social role in a society, when you're talking of my role as a man or my role as a woman, what exactly does this gender role mean? Gender role means adoption of masculine or feminine behavioral attributes that are considered appropriate. That's a very, very important word. Considered appropriate or characteristic of a particular sex. That means, for example, if you're talking of men, in India, when you see all across the country, the bread earning image, or to earn the bread and butter for the entire family, this is entirely mostly associated with the men folk. If you look at cooking, on the other hand, or looking after the home or the nurture aspect, this is usually considered, in quotes, considered to be appropriate for women. Now, what exactly are gender stereotypes and how do we deal with them? Let me give you the definition by the United Nations Human Rights Commission. It says, a gender stereotype is a generalized view or preconception about attributes or characteristics that are or ought to be possessed by, or the roles that are or should be performed by women and men. A gender stereotype is considered to be harmful when it limits women's and men's capacity to develop their personal abilities, pursue their professional careers, and make choices about their lives and life's plans. It can be really very detrimental. For example, generally when you grow up as a girl, when you're being, let us take the example of schooling, for example. Most of the times when you look at the SUPW options, the socially useful product work, which is work experience, which gives you a hands-on experience with reference to the different kind of skills, you find that girls usually are offered things like you can opt for needlework, right? Or you can opt for home science. And on the other hand, ladies and gentlemen, it's very important, friends, that we understand that gender stereotypes are not only limited to women and girls, they also limit men and boys with reference to their respective roles. For example, you may not be giving, for example, if a boy wants to offer in a work experience, for example, home science, or would like to learn cooking, generally you have seen that he is welcomed with raised eyebrows. You are a man. Why? Although, on the other hand, you see most of the famous chefs around the globe, it is a male bastion and you find men there, right? So, it's not only about limiting the capacities or the choices of women, it also limits the choices and capacities of men because of the way the society perceives their roles to be. And because you see men pursuing particular professional careers and women pursuing particular professional careers. You will also find that you generally, when a girl is growing up, she would be told that it's better if you opt for teaching as a career, so you can look after your home after that, and or you take nursing or take medicine as a career. On the other hand, the expectations for a boy would be that you take up engineering as a vocation or go to the defense forces. And when you look at the defense forces, which have now opened all avenues for women as well, you seldom find parents very open to the idea of sending their girls to the army or to the navy or to the air force per se. Why? Because they are not perceived as traditional roles which girls or women may don, right? So, a gender stereotype can be very, very limiting because traditionally it has been continuing for generations and generations and generations. Therefore, it becomes something which is so very much there, so very much fixed that it becomes a stereotype, that you continuously see its existence again and again, year after year in the lives of people. Now, when you talk of a gender stereotype, it's also very, very important for you to understand that what are the different types of gender stereotypes which we may look at. There are different types of gender stereotypes. For example, there are gender stereotypes attached to men and there are gender stereotypes attached to women, right? So, it's extremely important for us to see. For example, with respect to a man, you would generally see that you have notions or emotions such as aggressive. If it's a man, it ought to be aggressive. If it's a man, it ought to be assertive. He is a man, and if you look at it with reference to emotions, you say that men are analytical, okay? Men are very logical. On the other hand, when you look at women, you say they are more emotional. The entire aspect of nurture is attached with women, right? And you also say that with reference to women, there are also a number of other stereotypes. For example, if you're a man, you will be a great driver, right? Why? You would not be seeing the history of this person's driving for so many generations. And if it's a woman, you would say, oh, she would be a poor driver, right? And of course, we also discussed there are a number of professional attributes with reference to men and women, right? That even in a space, I'll give you a real life example. I went to a school looking at the different quotations which were there. And in one of the quotations I found it was written that it's very, very important for a woman to be having that sense of shame in her. Now, why should the notion of entire shame be attached to a woman? Now, this has been traditionally there in the Indian society, and it's also said that if you're a woman, you ought not to be argumentative. Argumentation is the male bastion. Men can argue, but you're considered to, and there's a quote, well-behaved women never make history, right? They say that a woman ought to be well-behaved. Ladies and gentlemen, it's not about men and women. We all need to be well-behaved with reference to whatever be our dealings at home, whatever be our dealings in our professional fields, and whatever be our dealings wherever, whether we are in a workplace, whether we are in the neighborhood, whether we are in a shopping mall, or whether we are out there in the garden with children, wherever we are. So, gender stereotypes are very much limiting the growth of men and women all across the world, right? And it's because of the patriarchal mindsets which are so much prevalent all across the globe, not only India, where till date you have a lot of apathy towards the education of girls. You have a lot of apathy. You also have a stereotype prevailing that if you educate girls too much, it becomes very, very difficult to handle them, or it may become very, very difficult for you to control them. Ladies and gentlemen, we do not need to control each other. It's very, very important that we give spaces to each other. We exercise that element of choice which is there as a human being. The whole problem arises is when we start looking at the entire world with the lens of men and women, right? We stop to look each other as human beings first. And this entire stereotypes pervades our lives so much that we are not even ready. If both a man of the house and the woman of the house both are working, we are not even ready for both of them to share equal load. Why? Because what we consider is that the entire responsibility, right? The entire responsibility of sharing the load at home, or the entire responsibility of nurturing the home at home, is the responsibility of the woman of the house. Whether it's nurturing of the kids, whether it's washing of the clothes, whether it's looking after the kitchen, the entire responsibility rests on the shoulders of the woman. And if you look at the reverse, the entire responsibility with reference to earning, or with the responsibility of working towards making the household work, it's there with the man. Now, if this is the state of affair, it's very, very difficult to break these gender stereotypes. We also have stereotypes with reference to the kind of sports which we are going to allow the women folk to engage with, the girls to engage with. Where if you can have women as astronauts, what forbids you for not allowing them with reference to the pursuance of certain sports which have been traditionally the male bastions? For example, if you look at cricket, cricket has been a male bastion for centuries. But now we see a change, but that change with reference to the society is very, very slow, right? And if you see the slow change, the change is that you have a cricket team, but the kind of responsibility, the kind of attention which a all girls cricket team or which a women's cricket team gets is very different to what is given with reference to a male cricket team. It is extremely important, that you understand that gender stereotypes are very much deep rooted with reference to the patriarchal mindsets. What do you mean by patriarchal mindsets? Patriarchal mindsets are the mindsets, that means, which have been traditionally there, where you look at a man to be superior to a woman, right? When you say a man is superior to a woman, it changes the entire notion of men versus women, right? It changes the entire idea of how you look at men and how you look at women. Let us look at some of the harmful stereotypes. For example, the fact that it can make people hostile and very negative in feeling. For example, when you say women are irrational, they are chiefly people who are driven by emotions and they don't use their logical faculties. And or seemingly benign, like women are nurturing. That means all women all across the world should be nurturing, and that women are irrational and their feelings always take over their logical faculty. Look at this stereotype. It is, for example, based on the stereotype that women are more nurturing because they have child rearing responsibilities. Just because a woman gives birth to a child, that doesn't mean that men cannot share the load with reference to the child rearing responsibilities. This is a responsibility of both men and women with reference to rearing up of a child. So these kind of stereotypes also are very, very harmful and create an imbalance between men and women in the society. Now, commonly prevalent gender stereotypes, as we were discussing, for men are aggressive, and on the other hand, when you see, women are submissive. So, and when you see these gender stereotypes, so any woman who is not considered or looked at or is submissive, you say she is behaving like a man. Why? Because this is the prevalent stereotype which is very much there. Or on the other hand, if you have a man who is not aggressive, who is not assertive, you say that he is behaving like a woman, which is so unfair, right? For men, you say that they are logical, and for women, you say they are emotional. You say men are better in mathematics and sciences. When I say you say, I mean the prevalent gender stereotype. And for women, we have that they are better in languages and arts. No research supports this data. So, they are very much in the realm of gender stereotypes. You say men are more decisive and you say women are less decisive. It's not about men are more decisive and women are less decisive. It depends how much choices do you give to them with reference to decision making. How many times do you involve women to be stakeholders with reference to any decision making, whether at your home or whether at your workplace? It is very, very important to see that decision making is not about being men and women, it's about opportunities to take decisions. Of course, you have seen that traditionally, initially, women were not being driving vehicles, but now they are driving. And when they drive, you say they don't make good drivers. And you now even have women taxi drivers, and they are doing a very good job of it, right? So, this is another prevalent stereotype. Again, you have the bread earner image entirely with men, that if it means earning the bread, if it means running the home, it is the man of the house who has to do it. And on the other hand, if it's about home, if it's about homemaking, if it's about cleaning of the house, it's about cooking, so on and so forth, child rearing, it's all to be done with women. Why? Because these are the traditional gender roles which have been thrust upon both the genders. Because gender is a social construction. Through your socialization, you are being given these roles, right? Then you say good in defense forces as engineers, men. And when you talk of women, you say as teachers and as nurses. But it has been seen, and it's almost there, that men also make to be very good nurses, right? The nurturing aspect which you take away from men and say that they're aggressive is also being unfair to men. And another gender stereotypes which are very much prevalent all across India. Women should not speak in loud voice or laugh loudly. It's considered to be uncultured. It's considered to be not becoming of a woman. So it's very, very important that you speak in a voice which is not very loud. And on the other hand, you do not even give the opportunity for boys and men to be sad, or if they are sad, they should not be crying. You are a man, you cannot shed tears. Be a man, don't shed tears. So what are you doing? Are you not basically trying to socialize them into their traditional gender role of being a man, of being aggressive, of not crying? Crying can be very therapeutic. So it's not about whether it's a man crying or it's a woman crying. It's a need which both of them may exercise depending when they need to. Then on the other hand, we already discussed cooking and washing of clothes is solely the work of women. No, this responsibility also in today's time should be shared by both men and women. It's extremely important. And women ought to take care of their homes. It's another stereotype. That means if it's a home, it is only the woman who's going to take care of it, right? She is traditionally very good at it. Why? She's traditionally very good at it because traditionally she has been doing it. We never allowed our women to venture out to the world of work. If you do not allow your girls and women to venture out in the world of work and keep them confined to the homes, then naturally they will be looking after the homes as well only. And it's important. We have so many live case studies all over, whether they're entrepreneurs, whether they are doctors, whether they are engineers, whether they are astronauts, doing so good for themselves. And they have been role models in breaking these prevalent gender stereotypes in India. Okay. Then we also see men are the decision makers. This we already discussed. Men are the decision makers because generally it is seen that the man of the house, because he has the bread earner image attached to him, he takes all the decisions, and women folk are generally ignored. They are the major decision makers. Why? Because you do not involve the women. Decisions should be taken jointly irrespective of whether your partner is working or not. Then women need to be sacrificing at all times. If women are not sacrificing, that means, oh, there's something wrong with this woman. If it's a woman, she ought to be sacrificing. And we do not attach the element of sacrifice with the man. Then you say, women are the weaker sex. Now, how is it a weaker sex? Yes, biologically, we are born with a little less of physical part, but does that make a woman a weaker sex? No, not at all. Women, like men, are emotionally and mentally very strong. And they have ventured into different roles and proven their mettle. Then you say women ought to be obedient. They need to be obedient, right? And you say that boys play with guns and girls play with dolls. And we don't even leave colors. We say pink is for girls and blue is for boys. So these gender stereotypes are not even restricted with reference to these roles. We don't even leave colors for that matter. Now, how to break these gender stereotypes, which is very, very important. Gender stereotypes can be broken by educating the masses about their being discriminatory in nature. It's very, very important. We need to go out, we need to discuss with people, we need to organize activities such as role plays, street plays, going into the rural or urban areas where you find these stereotypes are very deep rooted, discussing with people so that their mindsets about these change. Right? We need to discuss case studies of successful men working as chefs, housekeepers, and women as astronauts, pilots, etc. It's very, very important because these successful case studies give us a very, very clear indication that how it is only a stereotype, and men and women, when given equal opportunities, they prove their mettle equally. Then we can also break the stereotypes by holding seminars, workshops in rural and urban rooted areas in patriarchal mindsets. Wherever there is patriarchy, we need to venture in their areas and we need to see that we discuss issues and we are able to, at least bring about some change in the mindset with reference to patriarchy. Most importantly, introducing gender education as a part of the school curriculum. Telangana as a state in India has already done that. If it is infused in the curriculum, it becomes very easy because we start very early with reference to socializing them equally, both boys and girls, using co-curricular activities such as street plays, poetry recitation as a forum to raise gender issues such as feticide, because female feticide in India is still very rampant. So, it's extremely important that we take stock of these co-curricular activities so that we raise our voice through poems and through role plays such that it hits people. People are forced to think about these issues and their mindsets change. We have a successful case study in a very successful woman entrepreneur, Shahnaz Hussain. She captured the markets around the world and now she wants to conquer space. In an innovative move, Shahnaz Hussain has started work on formulations that astronauts could carry with them. It's extremely important that look at how she has ventured from beauty culture to the entire realm where she is also talking of working on formulations that astronauts could carry in extraterrestrial sojourns in space to protect their skin from the ravages of space travel and slow down the aging process. Then she has sent National Aeronautics and Space Administration NASA free samples of her moisturizer, hoping they will be used on space expeditions. Now you can look at how innovative the take with reference to the entire realm of beauty has been, and she is one of the most successful women entrepreneurs from India. Her company Shahnaz Hussain Herbals is one of the largest manufacturers of herbal products in the world. It formulates and markets over 400 products for a variety of beauty and health needs and has a strong global presence across the globe, from USA to Asia. Now, it's very, very important when you look at gender equality. A very powerful speech delivered by Emma Watson at United Nations for the He for She campaign said it perfectly. If men don't have to be aggressive in order to be accepted, women won't feel compelled to be submissive. If men don't have to control women, then they won't be controlled. Both men and women should feel free to be sensitive. It's not about a woman being sensitive or a man being insensitive. We both need to feel sensitive. Both men and women should feel free to be strong. It is time that we all perceive gender on a spectrum, not as two opposing set of ideals. It's very, very important. Till you keep compartmentalizing girls and boys, men and women into separate compartments, it would be very, very difficult for us to achieve any kind of gender equality. So, it's extremely important. What we learned in today's lecture was, we learned what is the difference between sex and gender. That sex is the biological orientation and gender is the social or societal orientation given to us by the society. We also try to define what do we understand by gender equality and by gender equity. That gender equality is the result and gender equity is the means to achieve gender equality. We also defined what do you understand by the term gender role, and then we moved on to discussing what do you understand by the term as defined by the United Nations Human Rights Commission, what do you understand by the term gender stereotype. After discussing gender stereotypes, the definitions the commonly attributed behaviors and roles which are prevalent from generations to generation and which have a detrimental effect on both the genders, we moved on to discussing the gender stereotypes which are very much prevalent all across India. Whether we talk of girls and women behaving in a particular way, or whether we say that men are insensitive, or whether we say men are better drivers. We discussed the different realms of these stereotypes which are prevalent across the Indian society. Now, it's extremely important that when you discuss gender stereotypes, we also therefore ventured into discussing how do we break these gender stereotypes. We would be breaking these gender stereotypes by, yes, putting gender education on a firm platform by integrating it in the curriculum. It is extremely important that we integrate it inside the curriculum. Then by looking at co-curricular activities as a very, very important domain which enables us to look at all these gender stereotypes, and we hope that this lecture also goes a long way in changing the gender stereotypes and looking at men and women as equals. If we start looking at men and women as equals, as human beings before men and women, I am sure we have a long way and we are going to achieve gender equality very soon. Although it seems to be a tall order, but it's important that we all join hands and move towards gender equity such that we achieve the goal of gender equality. And it's very, very important that you start discussing gender issues with your friends, with your family, with your teachers, with your peer group, so that we sooner move towards this goal. And as soon as we move towards this goal, I don't think we will need any more lectures with reference to gender stereotypes or with reference to breaking of these gender stereotypes. And we all would be discussing a world which is more equal, a world which is more fair, and a world where men and women both enjoy equal opportunities and they feel better about themselves and the world in which they live.